Hello and welcome to the August Community of Practice. My name is Mallory DeMay and I am a faculty support and classroom consultant in the Faculty Affairs Department. I'm fortunate to be your host for this session. Before we begin, I want to bring your attention to the slide on the screen listing the mission and behaviors of engagement for these sessions. The Community of Practice sessions and corresponding teams page provide a space for faculty and staff to come together to learn, discuss, and share ideas. When engaging with our speakers and one another in the chat, please remember to model respect, compassion, and acceptance. In these sessions, we hold each other in unconditional positive regard and do not attach judgment to anyone here. Go ahead and on the next slide, I'm just going to introduce the session that we're going to be having today. So we're going to be talking about fortifying your teaching philosophy using learning theory. So last month we examined the importance of a teaching philosophy and shared strategies for creating your own. So during this session, our presenters will be talking about incorporating learning theory into teaching philosophy and instructional practice. Throughout the session, there will be opportunities for you to participate in our discussion today. We invite you to share your thoughts, experiences, and questions in the chat, speaking on the microphone, or in our breakout sessions. And as a reminder, just remember to keep yourself muted until you are ready to share. And now I'm going to hand it over to Diana, who will get us started.
If I can get my slides to advance. Okay. Hi, my name is Diana Bogan, and I'm here today with Amy Erickson. We are both faculty development and coaching specialists in the Faculty Affairs Department. Just a quick reminder that everything on the slides today will be shared, links will be shared, the recording will be shared, all in the community of practice so that you can focus on engaging today with us. So I just want to start with a quick, in case you weren't able to join us in July for our first session of this new series, I wanted to quickly recap what we shared last month. So in August, so later this month, we are rolling out this year's annual faculty curriculum, which focuses on understanding the fundamentals of course development as it relates to and supports facilitation. At UAGC, we leverage a master course shell model that improves the design for learning, allows the instructor to focus on presence in the classroom, and encourages usability. We also use the educator practitioner model for hiring faculty who can teach content because of their formal education and work in their field. These models address issues of developing and facilitating learning at scale. However, they also have potential gaps. So this year's annual faculty curriculum will aid learners in obtaining an understanding of how curriculum is designed and, more critically, how that knowledge will support the facilitation of learning in the classroom toward better student outcomes. So for this series, we will be leveraging these community of practice sessions to explore themes from the upcoming curriculum. These sessions are the beginning of a multi-year conversation about what effective pedagogy looks like and what can be achieved in our model and through our online modality. Sorry, we want the discussions to start here in these synchronous sessions and continue offline in our community of practice teams page. So we will be share more on that later. So let's go ahead and get started. In July, we shared that a philosophy of teaching is a written statement that describes your core beliefs about the purpose of teaching and learning. A high-level description of how you teach and explains why you teach that way, how you think students learn best, and your goals as an educator. We explored how a clear and well-articulated teaching philosophy requires thoughtful reflection on your teaching practices and experiences, requires an understanding of learning theory and best practices in higher education, and how a teaching philosophy guides your pedagogical approach. We also shared tips for writing your own philosophy of teaching, which included a worksheet to help you get started, and we invited you to share your newly revised statement in the community practice teams page. If you haven't had a chance to do that yet, don't worry. Today's session expands on how learning theory impacts your teaching philosophy, so we hope that you will incorporate what we discussed today into your revised statement. We're going to watch this very short clip. So you might be wondering why I just showed you that scene from The Big Theory. I mean, other than it being a funny video on learning theory, right? We recognize that there is not one supreme learning theory that will fit every learning situation. This is not Lord of the Rings. There's no one ring to rule them all. For example, it's unlikely that we will use Pavlov's classical conditioning theory to elicit learning in our online modality. We're not bribing our students with chocolate to turn in their homework, right? But this does not disregard classical conditioning as a useful theory given the right situation. You know, you can fundamentally be a social constructivist, but still leverage cognitive load theory in your teaching practices. You need to use the best learning theory for the situation to address the needs of all students in a diverse classroom. So there are a multitude of learning theories out there. I think one article we're going to share later has 31 different learning theories. It's like going to Baskin Robbins to pick out ice cream, right? 31 different flavors. And exploring more of these theories will help you differentiate your teaching practices and allow you to meet the needs of a wide range of learners. But with this in mind, and knowing that we use that educator practitioner model to hire our faculty, we often find that instructors come to UAGC, or any institution for that matter, with incredible subject matter expertise. However, many who aren't specifically in fields devoted to education or learning may have little to no background in teaching methods or learning theory. We also know that incorporating learning theory into our teaching philosophy can improve our instructional practices and student achievement. So our aim today is not to give you an exhaustive list or lesson on learning theory. Instead, we want to discuss the purpose of learning theory, explore how learning theory informs your teaching philosophy, and explain the benefits of finding learning theory that aligns with your values and beliefs about teaching and learning. Our ultimate goal is to promote discussion, inquiry, and investigation around learning theory and your instructional practices, so you can then incorporate that into a teaching philosophy statement that expresses value with language used throughout academia. And hopefully you will share that statement with your students in your Canvas profile and announcements, and the rest of us in our community practice Teams channel. And we are going to do a real quick poll before Amy heads into learning theory. Do you apply learning theory in your course design or instructional practices? Just looking, we got about 70% of people reporting in. And so far, it looks like a lot of you use multiple theories depending on the situation, but we still have about 12% of you that are new to learning theory. So I'm glad that you're here to learn more about learning theory. All right, so there are results, and now we're going to jump over and Amy's going to take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Diana. We thought it'd be good to start out with a definition of learning theory. And Drew shared this definition. Learning theories are frameworks that explain how people acquire and retain knowledge. They provide a systematic way to understand how individuals process and respond to new information. Different theories focus on different aspects of the learning process, such as cognitive, behavioral, and constructivist approaches. So with that in mind, let's move ahead to the next slide. So understanding learning theories allows an instructor to incorporate various methods into one's teaching practice. These methods associated with various learning theories can be evaluated for efficacy, and an instructor can decide if the theory's methods were successful enough to incorporate into future lessons, future courses, or ultimately one's teaching philosophy. Let's consider an example. Perhaps you found that students were more successful when you provided opportunities for students to observe you performing the skill you were trying to teach. You might want to incorporate elements of social learning theory into your teaching philosophy. So, and as Diana noted, you don't necessarily have to adhere solely to one learning theory. Being exposed to multiple learning theories provides instructors with more tools for their toolbox, and this in turn benefits a wider variety of students. For example, maybe 70% of students respond positively in terms of content retention when narratives are used in the classroom. We don't want to simply abandon the other 30%, so perhaps we'll try visual techniques with these students or engage in collaborative exercises to improve comprehension. The more familiar we are with various learning theories, the more options we can offer our students. So, a working knowledge of a learning theory that aligns with your values and beliefs about teaching and learning will help you build your teaching philosophy. Additionally, understanding learning theory and its application will help you think through your approach in the classroom or develop courses dedicated to student achievement. Learning theory gives faculty a lens through which they can design formative and summative assessments, evaluate their practices, and communicate their beliefs about effective pedagogy to the greater academic community. As Diana alluded to earlier, faculty who begin their educator journey in a discipline that does not teach pedagogy or learning theory may establish their practices based on what they've experienced as a student or what they've been taught by educators in their field. And this is not a bad place to start, nor is it uncommon. However, in developing an understanding of not just what we've experienced, but the theory behind why material is taught and assessed in a specific way, we can begin to step toward an informed practice based on decades of evidence-based research. So, as you incorporate methods from the various learning theories and theorists into your classroom, you can evaluate their efficacy and decide whether or not to add elements to your teaching philosophy. And as you continue to teach and review various learning theories and theorists, know that your teaching philosophy can grow and adjust accordingly. So now we have, let's take a look at one learning theory, and we decided constructivism would be a good one to start out with. And as you can see here, there are 3 different categories for constructivism. But let's look at social constructivism, this first one. This school of thought posits that learning cannot be delivered to students by passively listening to a teacher dispensing knowledge. Instead, learners have an active role in thinking things through, mulling them over, coming to conclusions based on logic and critical thinking. So this theory explains that we learn by constructing knowledge. Learners develop schemas in their long-term memory to organize their thoughts as events occur. And as knowledge is acquired, learners reflect on that experience, which helps them pull from prior knowledge, these schemas, and then incorporate that knowledge into new ideas. And let's go ahead and advance that slide. So Vygotsky was a social constructivist and is known for the zone of proximal development, or the ZPD. You may have heard us talk about this before, but if you're unfamiliar with it, the little picture on the side there shows in the green what the learner is able to do without any assistance. The purple shows what the learner can do with guidance, and the red at the top there shows what a learner cannot do without assistance. So the zone of proximal development is right there in the middle in that purple, and that's where the student can be pushed with guidance from a knowledgeable other, when that can be an instructor most often. Sometimes that can be a peer as well. But Vygotsky believed that knowledge was constructed socially and in an active learning environment, and that development was not related to age, and that the potential to grow was based on where the student fell in that zone of proximal development. So let's go ahead and advance the slide, please. So what would that look like in a classroom? Here are some examples for facilitators across 3 categories of constructivism, and we'll stay focused on Vygotsky here. His belief that knowledge is constructed socially could be realized through group discussions or breakout sessions and synchronous meetings, offering feedback not just focused on the success of completing the task, but pushing the learner to think more critically about content and perhaps take that next step, maybe even beyond the zone of proximal development. Those are some ideas for instruction. And if you could go ahead and thank you, Diana. Now, as Diana alluded to earlier, there are over 30 different types of learning theories, and to go through all of them would not only be exhausting, but it would also violate just about every tenet of cognitive load theory. So with that in mind, let's do a brief overview of the following 4 theories, just to get some ideas flowing before we jump into our breakout discussion. So we'll go back to constructivism here. Vygotsky's zone of proximal development is key here, where a more knowledgeable other will assist students with content that is slightly out of their reach. Content should be scaffolded to build upon previous knowledge and experiences, and students actively engage in the material, and instructors can recognize how things like culture and personal experience influence concepts of reality. These are just some elements of constructivism for you to consider as you discuss with your peers here. Cognitivism promotes collaboration, and this could be done via discussions or using synchronous tools. Students can be asked to engage in metacognitive tasks like journaling or explaining their thinking. Tools like visuals can be used to help to show students how things are interconnected. And students should be allowed to make errors and correct those errors and pose questions and work through their own ideas about content. Next, social learning theory. In social learning theory, students learn by observing. So educational technologies can be used to provide demonstrations that students can mimic. An example that comes to mind here is of an instructor working out a math problem for students to follow, or asking students to emulate an author's writing style. This theory also recognizes the influence a student's mental state can have on the process of learning. And finally, cognitive load theory. This encourages students to build on existing knowledge and encourage instructors to gradually introduce material so as not to overwhelm short-term memory. Unnecessary information should be excluded, and relevant content should be prioritized in hopes of helping content make it into long-term memory. So I'm going to go ahead and return it back to Diana here.
Here's just an overview of all of the learning theories that Amy just went over. We are going to actually post these in the chat in just a moment, so you have them to reference when you go into your breakout sessions. So for this breakout session, we're only going to do one in the session. We got some feedback that you just never have enough time. So we wanted to allow more time for you to have discussion. So when we go off to our breakout rooms, we want you to think about the instructional practice you favor and what learning theory or theories might align with your values and beliefs about teaching and learning. How do you think students learn best? Is there a learning theory you want to look into more? How might you incorporate learning theory into your teaching philosophy? Those are just some ideas for you to think about as you go into the discussion. You can either type in the chat and share your key takeaways, or you can unmute and speak up, whichever you feel like doing.
I'll start. We had a great conversation in room 5, and we had some amazing faculty members who shared what it is that they use in their classrooms. And Marcia West, who teaches project management, she uses this term, try again. And I felt that was very compelling. And what it means is that she allows the student to, try another time and another time after that, till they get the concept, till they understand what's going on. And I think that's real important for our population of students. She also uses that, she says that if she repeats the information, sometimes that information now is in their brains for long term and not just a short term, because now there's been a repetitive process. So that was real interesting as well. And then Leon, who teaches finance, and I'm sorry I didn't write Leon's last name, he puts himself in the student's shoes, and he finds videos on how to, because finance, he says that a lot of times they don't have prerequisites in the course. So the students come in kind of raw, not understanding the concept of the course overall. And he had mentioned a student not even ever balancing their checkbook, but they're taking a finance course. So they might need a little work and a little prepping in order to understand that. And then Dr. Woods, he talked about using constructivism and cognitivism. And sorry, because I cannot say that all the way. But he also provides extra materials for the students. So extra videos and extra links and things like that to help with the learning process. So we had an overall amazing conversation, as usual.
That is great to hear. Thank you, Benita, for sharing that.
I'd like to go next if I can.
Of course.
So my group, we kind of learned, well, not kind of, we did learn that, you know what, life's changing now. I know this is more Generation X, latter Generation X, and this is a whole new world. Bygone are the days of where, you had to do an assignment and you turned it in and you had to follow the instructions. I mean, to be honest, we have to compete against TikTok University, the Learning Instagram Institute, and other social media. So I mean, you have students' brains that run 1,000 miles a minute, and then we have our good friend artificial intelligence, who has now grown very huge, and now is really now in retail mode. I found at least 75 sites that uses AI. With that being said, though, I think the today's instructor or today's professor has to absolutely meet the student where they are. There is no more, you turn in seat work, you get a C grade. Today's professors now, you know what? I am the guy that's going to get you this degree so you can have a better life. I am the facilitator that's going to get you a better life, a better quality of life. In my class, you're going to learn to apply this to get a bigger paycheck or to get a better paying job. The only thing I cannot cure is if you don't turn in work, I can't help you if you don't turn in work. But today's student is busting their behinds. They're looking at videos. They're researching things. I don't think today's professor is a professor anymore, but rather a learning partner and a coach. It's like I take an approach to my students and said, when they don't understand something, it's more like Professor Simpson no longer exists. Now it's Leroy. Okay, we need to sit down and we need to get through this assignment. We need to sit down and let you understand this, and we need to sit down and get you through this, because you are giving forth an effort, and I am not going to give you an F just because you don't understand the work. Well, I need to sit down. Sometimes 10 o'clock at night, sometimes 11 o'clock at night. So now there are so many tools out there, but now we're competing against so much as educators. So the group is not necessarily using a teaching philosophy per se, or kind of a learning theory, but it's more or less like, you're in my classroom, we got a job to do. If you don't apply what I've taught you, then I fail as an educator. You should not walk out of my class like, what the heck did he just say? Or how am I going to use this theorem in a banking situation? We have to be relevant to today. And now today's educator is now more practical than ever. And like I said, besides, again, we're competing against the TikTok Institute, and where people are saying use bleach to wash a car and stuff like that. So we have to be on our game and, be that we almost got to be the Robin to their Batman. Students are really driving. They're really driving. They're really driving. So that's my philosophy.
And those are some great points, and a lot of the things that you mentioned align very well with different learning theories, like meeting students where they are and those different things. Teresa has her hand up. Real quick, Allison, I wanted to comment on your facilitator is a great word for how we help our students access their education. I had read an article that some teachers didn't like being referred to as facilitators, but Leroy mentioned, that everything's changing, and you really do have to be a coach and help facilitate the learning instead of just being, the teacher at the front of the room. All right, Teresa, go ahead.
Well, I was going to pose one question, but then what Leroy said made me think of something else, and what Allie posted too. I am sharing just because I love this stuff so much. So when Lev Vygotsky was working out these theories about the zone of proximal development and social constructive learning, he actually started out he wanted to be a literary critic. And wanted to be like a creative writer. So he's working in this whole cultural context of that. And at the time, in the early 20th century, there was a huge conversation in those circles about how it is the process of discourse, the process of dialogue, where any individual comes to be who they are, right? We can't do it on our own. It requires the intervention of any other that we encounter. So I just love the idea of being a learning partner, as though it is like absolutely necessary to our existence, right? Our students can't be unless we're constructing this knowledge together, constructing essentially our reality together. So woohoo for being a facilitator, whatever you want to call it, especially to Leroy's points about the way the world is changing. that one core element about needing each other to learn is always going to stay constant. So I think that's pretty cool. But the question I was going to ask the group, not that we need to discuss now, but maybe in the Teams page, if you want to share your thoughts. I was in the same group that Benita was reporting on, and William was in. And when I asked William the same question, when we talk about adding resources for our students, like, oh, hey, check out this video over here, or these additional, readings, etc. We know that that's a really wonderful way to capture students' attention, to keep them interested, maybe to differentiate material according to what they're interested in. How do we balance that in light of cognitive load, elements of cognitive load? If anybody has any, practices that you use or observations that you make of your students that inform maybe when you add stuff versus pull back, I think that would be a very helpful conversation, maybe in Teams.
Thank you, Teresa. William has his hand up.
And I was in Teresa's group, as she said, and we had one person in there that talked about using humor. And I noticed that Dr. Simpson was doing that because he did a form of body shaming with Mr. AI, talking about how large he had grown.
Well, he is big.
He is big.
Well, hopefully Mr. AI won't get his feelings hurt.
Oh,
You
no,
know, as much as I love a good superhero reference, Dr. Simpson, something else you said really struck a chord with me. And, specifically Instagram and TikTok and all these things. It kind of speaks to the one of the points of social learning theory, that you need to take into account the student's mental state. And when you think of how these students are overwhelmed with this content coming through their phone, and some of that content can be incredibly upsetting to students, that we need to think about that and have that in the front of our mind, even if we don't engage in things like Instagram or TikTok. They've got a lot of information coming in, which also then speaks to cognitive load, Teresa. One thing that I found to be helpful was if I wanted to share something with students that I thought might interest them. For example, I recently had a discussion about confirmation bias, and students were talking about how they could seek out information or make sure that what they were viewing, reading was accurate, and what we could do about things like fake news and that sort of stuff. And one student expressed a great deal of outrage. And so what I did was I just, in my assignment feedback to the student in the discussion forum, that's where I'll put stuff like, hey, here's this podcast from this investigative journalism podcast called Reveal. And this is all about fake news. It's called Pizzagate. It might really interest you. And so when it's that personal, instead of just putting it in the discussion board for everyone to see, I think it shows that you're listening to them. You kind of understand where they're coming from, and you're looking for something specific that will interest them or guide them in their development. So that's one thing I use. I'd love to hear other people as well, if they have other tactics for finding a way to support students with additional resources, to share different perspectives with different resources, but to tread that thin line about cognitive load and overload.
Yeah, Amy, what I normally do is I just kind of use the discussion. I use the announcements sometimes for supplemental learning, and I make that very clear that this is related to the course. And I make sure that I'm mindful of my words, use my intuition, who I'm talking to. For some of you, you may enjoy this. Here's something to watch. Here's a video. But a lot of times when I'm in a discussion forums, I'm doing the same thing that you're doing, and I'm framing, the context of why I want to share that. I might come out and hold favorable attention and say that was absolutely super. You connected with this, content's transferring to you. I will quote the student. I learned a long time ago from Mark Ryan in the psychology department that he had, how to bridge that gap and how to connect with students. And he had I think he called it a gold file, how my memory serves me right. But the point is, meet the student where they're at. Everybody's a little different. You can tell the ones that are struggling a little bit, but I'm all for what you're doing. I think first of all, I think your presentation today is wonderful too. And, but I'm all for being student-centered, you know, because there's some high achievers out there going to want more. I'm going to give them more. There's other ones there I'm going to flex down and make my adaptation and adjustment. And a lot of this is how we, not only how we teach, but how we facilitate, you know, and also tone, you know, use our durable skills, using positive, being mindful of our words and be uplifting, you know, so, but super points. I kind of do the same thing you do. So.
You know,
Thanks.
Bill, you might really enjoy Dr. Mays Imad. She has she's in Arizona, actually, at Pima Community College. She's a neuroscientist, and she talks about a learning sanctuary. And I love this line she uses. She talks about radical hospitality in the classroom. And I just love that. So I'll send you a link because I think you'd really like her stuff. I'm trying to see if she'll come to TLC maybe. So stay tuned on that one.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. Elena, you have your hand up, and then we are almost out of time. William, we'll see if we have enough time to get to you too.
I'll keep it brief.
So something I like to do specifically related to cognitive load is, because students are inundated with so much information, is that sometimes I like to give them information, but information that's fun. It's not necessarily, so I do in my classroom what I call my Monday brain break. Monday's the end of the learning week. I have an announcement that I post every Monday. That's something fun or interesting that I enjoy, that I think they might enjoy. One was back during the pandemic, there was a series of actors who were reading James and the Giant Peach aloud. And so I posted a link to that particular reading video, and it was like Taika Waititi and Chris Hemsworth and Kate, like all of these A-list actors sort of doing an audio book. And so, and then asking the students, what was your favorite book when you were a kid? And so getting them to have a chance to interact with each other, but it feels like there's no consequences to the interaction. It's not going to impact their grade. They can just sort of relax, talk about something they enjoy without sort of feeling the pressure of this is an interaction for a grade. And so, and then really sort of building off on that. Right now I have one that I like to use with Bob, because I'm teaching Gen 101 with Bob Ross and talking about mistakes and there's no such thing as actually making a mistake. It's just an opportunity to put another little happy little tree there or turn it into a bush. And so it's just from the PBS channel, a Bob Ross video of him painting a picture and then talking about how we can make mistakes and make interesting mistakes and things like that. And so, like, giving them those opportunities to understand that mistakes are just opportunities rather than failures, and doing it in a fun way. So it's teaching, but it's low stakes.
That's great. And who doesn't like Bob Ross? All right, William, you got like 1 minute. You can do it.
So on the cognitive load, one of the things that I do when I'm supplying extra materials to a student that I'm discussing a topic with, I make sure that I post a reference, and then I tell them about where it is in the article that they can find it, because some articles are multifaceted, so many different topics in the same article. So I just tell them where it is, and so that saves them the time. And most of the time they reply back and they use the reference that I gave them. So it's kind of nice that way.
That is great. It is. It's so much nicer than saying, "Oh, it's in the reading material," and it's like, "Well, I read the reading material, but there's like 6 pages." Okay, let me share my screen really quickly so that Mel has time to wrap up. We definitely think this has been a great conversation and would love for you to continue it offline in our Teams page. I'm sharing this image not to overwhelm you. This is why we focused on just like one learning theory, and then Amy kind of introduced 3 others. There are so many theories and theorists you can explore, and I heard so many different instructional practices today that you could align to multiple different theories. So I'm just putting this out there. If you haven't seen anything that fits in with your personal views and beliefs about teaching and learning, because that's what we want you to investigate, there's lots of things for you to still look at. This resource kind of breaks it down by the school of thought, the theory, and then key theorists. So we're also going to share a worksheet that kind of gives some examples on instructional practices that are kind of common. Again, some of the things have been mentioned, and then what theory they might align to, so just to get you started. So we'd really like for you to spend some time, maybe the next week or two, while we're still in this series, or at least before, I'm sorry, not the next week or two, the next month, while we're still in the series, to kind of, investigate a learning theory and see how it aligns to your values and beliefs about learning, teaching and learning, and then incorporate some of that language about the learning theory into your teaching philosophy. That's our goal, is we wanted you to express your teaching philosophy in terms of that evidence-based research practices. But here we have some resources. Again, we're going to share these in Teams for you, the links, and we still have that offer if you're working on your philosophy of teaching, that Amy and I will sit down with you, go through it, and give you some points and things to consider. And lots of people on that Teams channel would be more than happy to give you feedback as well. So with that, I am going to hand it back over to Mallory.
Thanks, Diana. So I just want to wrap up this session here quick today. So thank you so much for attending. As we normally do, we will put the recording, the slides, discussion questions, and chat in the Community of Practice Teams channel. And we encourage you to continue the conversation in that Teams page. And it's our opportunity to come together as one faculty and staff to learn, discuss, and collaborate on different topics related to pedagogy, instruction, and initiatives. And again, you can use this for your professional development credit. If you're currently teaching a course, just check with your lead faculty just to confirm. And then remember, starting in July, we are now offering 2 sessions each month now. So we will have another session on Thursday, August 3rd at 3 p.m. Pacific time. So mark your calendars for that. And again, you only have to attend one of the sessions. You don't have to attend both because it's the same presentation. And if you're interested in leading a community of practice session, please reach out to our faculty affairs inbox at facultyaffairs@uagc.edu. So with that, I just want to thank everyone again for coming today, and we will see you at the next session.